The letter from my own company, Blackwood Financial, landed on my desk with a thud. $2 million. Gone. My father's life insurance payout, intended to secure my future, had been cashed and spent by my stepmother, Brenda. Not on grief counseling, but on a convertible for her new boyfriend. But they missed the fine print. A unique fraud clause in the policy, one I helped to design, had just been triggered. The policy was now void. And because I was the secondary beneficiary and a senior advisor, the firm wasn't just recalling the funds. They were tasking me with clawing back every single cent from the woman who betrayed my father's memory. My hunt was about to begin. My hunt didn't begin with private investigators. It began with a single click. Brenda's social media was a public spectacle, a monument to her own stupidity. Her profile picture showed her clinging to a man named Todd, whose sun-bleached hair and leathery tan screamed, "Poolside opportunist." I scrolled through a gallery of their new life, funded by my father's death. There it was, the crimson convertible, parked in front of a gaudy beach house in the Florida Keys. The caption read, "Finally living the life we deserve. Thanks for the upgrade, Angel." Angel. She called my father an upgrade. My father, who worked 60-hour weeks to build a legacy she was now burning through with a man who looked like he ironed his t-shirts. They'd even tagged their location, the Marlin Bay Resort. A rookie mistake. A cold, razor-sharp clarity settled over me. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about a debt of respect. I saved the photos, the captions, the location. Exhibit A was complete. My case file had just opened itself. The photos on my screen weren't just evidence. They were the final chapter of a story I saw coming years ago. My father, a brilliant engineer who could design a bridge to withstand a hurricane, couldn't see the disaster standing right in front of him. After my mother died, the loneliness ate at him, leaving a void that Brenda filled like concrete. He met her at a charity gala, a place she haunted, not supported. She was a human-shaped black hole, absorbing sympathy and compliments with a practiced ease. She clung to his arm, her eyes wide with a manufactured admiration that I saw right through. To my grieving father, she was a lifeline. To me, she was a predator in a cocktail dress. I tried to warn him. I cornered him in his study, the room still smelling of my mother's favorite vanilla candles. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice level, "I ran a background check. Her credit history is a wildfire." He waved a dismissive hand, refusing to look at the folder I held out. "She's had a hard life, David. She just needs a fresh start. She makes me happy. Isn't that enough?" It wasn't. A few months later, the inevitable happened. He called me at Blackwood, his voice filled with a foolish, youthful excitement. He wanted to update his life insurance policy. He was making Brenda the primary beneficiary. A gesture of my commitment, he called it. I knew it was a catastrophic mistake, a $2 million goodbye to his entire legacy. I couldn't legally stop him, but I could build a cage. "Of course, Dad," I'd said, my voice pure professionalism as I drew up the documents. "With a policy of this size, the firm insists we add our new bespoke fraud clause. It's a standard asset protection measure for high-value clients." I didn't tell him I'd personally designed that clause. It was my masterpiece of corporate warfare, a landmine hidden in legalese. It stipulated that if, within 90 days of payout, the primary beneficiary engaged in extravagant expenditures grossly inconsistent with the established financial character of the estate, the policy would be voided due to fraudulent intent. The funds would be subject to immediate recall, pursued by the secondary beneficiary, me. He scanned the paragraph, his eyes glazing over. "Sounds smart. Whatever you think is best, son." He trusted me implicitly with his money, never imagining I was protecting it from his heart. He signed the document, sealing Brenda's fate. Looking at the picture of that convertible now, I felt a grim satisfaction. The trap I'd set 5 years ago had just snapped shut across 2 states. The bait was gone, but the pest was caught. My father had asked if his happiness was enough. Now, my justice would have to be. My father's funeral was a masterclass in performative grief. Brenda, draped in black silk that probably cost more than my first car, dabbed at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. She accepted condolences with a practiced tremor in her voice, playing the role of the heartbroken widow so perfectly that even I felt a flicker of doubt. It was that performance, I soon discovered, that had been her dress rehearsal. Back at my office, the scent of stale coffee replacing the cloying sweetness of funeral lilies, I dove into our system. Claim file number 77B-4, my father's life, reduced to a reference number. The disbursement had been processed by Jessica Albright, a junior associate in the claims department. I had her in my office in under 5 minutes. She sat opposite my desk, wringing her hands, a deer caught in the high beams of corporate authority. "Mr. Keller," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "I am so sorry for your loss." I leaned forward, my hands flat on the mahogany. "Jessica, I appreciate that. But what I need right now isn't sympathy. It's an explanation. The payout on my father's policy was wired in 72 hours. Our average is 30 days. Walk me through it." Her face paled. Mrs. Keller filed an expedited hardship claim. She was very convincing. Convincing how? Jessica swallowed, pulling up the file on her tablet. She provided invoices from the oncology ward. She said they weren't fully covered. And a bill from the funeral home. It was astronomical. She claimed your father had private debts, and creditors were threatening to seize the house. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading for understanding. She sat right there, where you are, and she wept. She said she was going to lose everything he'd worked for. I was just trying to help. My blood ran cold. The funeral was prepaid. My father's medical insurance was platinum grade. And private debts? My father's financial records were as clean as a surgeon's scalpel. I knew because I managed them. "Show me the invoices," I said, my voice dangerously calm. She turned the tablet towards me. The documents were good. Very good. The letterheads were perfect, the formatting impeccable. But the details were all wrong. The invoice numbers were out of sequence. The contact person at the hospital was a doctor who had retired 3 years ago. They were expert forgeries, designed to fool a sympathetic, overworked junior associate. They were not designed to fool me. Brenda hadn't just stumbled into $2 million. She had meticulously planned the theft, forging a paper trail of fake debt to justify her speed. She had weaponized my father's death before his body was even cold. "Thank you, Jessica," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "That will be all. The firm's legal department will be in touch." She practically fled my office. I was left alone, staring at the digital ghosts of Brenda's lies. This wasn't just greed. This was a hostile takeover of my father's legacy, executed with a sociopath's precision. She wasn't a grieving widow, she was a professional, and the game she was playing had rules I knew all too well. It was time to make my first move. My finger hovered over my keyboard, and I began typing a name into a very different, very private search field. Not Brenda's. Todd's. The poolside opportunist was about to have a very bad day. My fingers didn't shake. They moved with the cold precision of a surgeon. Todd Sharp was a name as flimsy as his spray-on tan, a ghost in the public domain. But Blackwood Financial doesn't just use Google. We pay a fortune for the digital keys to every skeleton closet in the country. Cross-referencing property records from the Marlin Bay Resort with the registration for a new Crimson convertible in Monroe County took less than 5 minutes. The name on the title wasn't Todd Sharp. It was Thomas J. Peterman. Todd was his business name. Thomas Peterman was a professional parasite. His profile bloomed on my screen, a pathetic epic of financial predation. No criminal record. He was too slippery for that. His expertise was in what lawyers call alienation of affection. He was a specialist in the art of the fast romance, targeting grieving women with fresh inheritances. I scrolled through a litany of civil judgments that stretched from Arizona to Mississippi. He didn't just find these women, he had a system. My father wasn't Brenda's first victim, but I was willing to bet she was Thomas Peterman's biggest score. The data painted a grim, predictable picture. A string of personal bankruptcies, each one conveniently filed just after a wealthy widow's savings account, was mysteriously drained. But the real key, the lever I could use to shatter their entire fantasy, was buried in a court filing from 3 years ago in Phoenix. A woman named Maria Flores. She'd won a default judgment against him for $300,000, the entirety of her late husband's estate. Peterman had vanished before she could collect a single cent. I saved her lawyer's contact information. Then I dove into Peterman's financial patterns. It was a language I understood better than English. He wasn't just a con man. He was a degenerate gambler. There were huge cash withdrawals from casino floors in Biloxi, always followed by a swift change of address and a new Todd persona. He didn't invest money. He mainlined it at a roulette table. Brenda's $2 million payout wasn't a nest egg. It was his personal gambling stake for the biggest game of his life. A quiet hum filled my office. The sound of a perfectly functioning machine. My machine. Brenda thought she'd found a partner in crime. She'd actually hired a liability with a documented history of self-immolation. I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity. This wasn't a messy family drama. It was a hostile asset recovery. My targets were 2 unsecured high-risk debtors, and I was the creditor. I picked up my phone. I didn't call the police. I didn't need a private investigator. I dialed the number for a small law office in Phoenix. A paralegal answered, her voice tired. "Please inform Ms. Flores's attorney that David Keller is calling," I said, my voice perfectly level. "I have the current location and detailed asset information for Thomas Peterman, and I'd like to propose a mutually beneficial partnership." The line was silent for a moment. I had just found Todd's ghost. The paralegal put me on hold. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was the sound of a predator holding its breath. When a new voice came on the line, it was rough, tired, and deeply skeptical. "This is Arthur Hayes. You have 5 seconds to not waste my time, Mr. Keller." I didn't need 5. I have the current location, asset portfolio, and known alias of Thomas J. Peterman. Your client, Maria Flores, has an outstanding $300,000 judgment against him. I'm offering you the means to collect. A rustle of papers. "We've heard that before. We get tips from his other victims. He's a ghost." "He's not a ghost," I said, my voice as flat as a balance sheet. "He's a creature of habit. He's currently at the Marlin Bay Resort in the Florida Keys, driving a new crimson convertible registered in his real name, funded by a $2 million life insurance policy he and his new partner just fraudulently acquired. From my father." The silence on the other end of the line was different now. It was the sound of a hunter's ears perking up. "Go on." "Your judgment from Arizona is a legal hammer, but you lack a target. I have the target. I want to partner with you. We filed to domesticate your judgment in Monroe County, Florida. It's a simple, swift process. Once it's recognized by the Florida courts, we get an immediate writ of execution." "A writ to do what?" Hayes asked, the skepticism replaced by sharp focus. "Freeze a bank account? He'll have 5 of them, all empty by the time the ink is dry." "We will freeze the primary account, yes," I confirmed, "but that's just the first shot, a diversion. Thomas Peterman is a degenerate gambler. His history shows major cash activity at high-limit tables. He won't keep $2 million in a savings account. That's not a nest egg to him, it's a poker stake. The real money will be held in cash, or more likely as a line of credit with a casino." I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. "So where are we aiming?" "Everywhere," I said. "Once the Florida writ is issued, we serve it not just to the bank, but to the compliance departments of the top 5 casinos in southern Florida and the Bahamas. We flag him. A man with an active fraud judgment for this amount is a liability. They'll freeze his credit line and suspend his privileges immediately. We don't just cut off his money, we cut off his oxygen. This was my world, not back alleys and threats, but jurisdictions and compliance clauses. A world Brenda and her boy toy couldn't possibly comprehend. "What's your angle, Keller?" Hayes pressed. "What do you get out of this?" "Chaos," I said simply. "When you detonate a financial bomb in their lap, they will panic. Brenda will try to protect her share. Peterman will try to grab what he can and run. They'll turn on each other. They'll make mistakes. They will leave a trail of digital breadcrumbs so obvious that my firm's lawyers can execute our own fraud clause without a fight. Your legal action gives me the perfect cover. You get your client's money, and I get a clear path to mine. We are not friends, Mr. Hayes. We are temporarily aligned interests." There was a long pause. I heard him exhale, a slow, appreciative breath. "My client lost her house because of that son of a bitch. She's been working 2 jobs for 3 years. You get me her money back, and you can burn him to the ground for all I care. Send me everything you have. I'll have the domestication paperwork filed by morning." We hung up. I didn't feel a rush of victory. I felt the quiet, satisfying click of a complex mechanism locking into place. My hunt wasn't about chasing them to Florida. It was about building a cage around them from 1,000 miles away. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I compiled every piece of data. Peterman's real name, his known aliases, the car's license plate, the resort's address, the social media photos, the bank routing number from my father's policy disbursement, and a summary of Peterman's litigious past. I encrypted the file and sent it to Hayes. The subject line was simple: Peterman Asset File. Then I opened a new email, this one to Blackwood Financial's internal legal counsel and my direct superior. I attached the same file. Subject: Asset Recovery Protocol, Policy Number 77B Sakal Papov's team. Pursuant to the bespoke fraud clause in the aforementioned policy, I have initiated an asset recovery strategy. The primary beneficiary, Brenda Keller, and her associate Thomas Peterman, a known financial predator, are engaged in extravagant expenditures inconsistent with the estate. Thomas Statenay's Gensik Ski Bloody Wedges. I have located a pre-existing legal judgment against Mr. Peterman from a prior victim. I have formed a provisional alliance with their legal counsel to leverage their claim, which will create the necessary disruption to allow for our own recovery. This action will serve to destabilize their financial position and mitigate the firm's losses. All actions are being conducted through official legal channels. I will keep you apprised of all developments. Tom's Tours regards. Tom's Tours David Keller. Tom's Tours David Keller. Bose Lind. Doc Sauces. Tom's Tours David Keller of Management. Bose Lind. Doc Sauces. Rehit send. There. It was official. Documented. I wasn't a grieving son seeking revenge. I was a corporate officer executing a pre-approved protocol. My personal war was now a sanctioned Blackwood operation. I leaned back in my chair, the leather groaning in the silent office. The trap was set. The legal filings would be a whisper at first, a ripple in a system they didn't know was watching them. But that ripple was about to become a tidal wave. Time to crash down on their tiki bar paradise. They thought they had gotten away with it. They were celebrating, but they couldn't hear the sound of the servers spinning in Phoenix, or the click of a lawyer's pen in Charlotte. They were sunbathing in the shadow of a guillotine, and I had just given the order for it to drop. The next 4 days were the longest of my career. I didn't go to Florida. I didn't need to. I sat in my climate-controlled office in Charlotte, watching my trap from 1,000 miles away. My world was a triptych of screens, one for market data, one for my internal Blackwood correspondence, and one dedicated to a single, blinking cursor in a secure chat with Arthur Hayes. On the morning of the 5th day, the cursor stopped blinking. A message appeared. Hayes, it's done. Judgment domesticated. Writ of execution, #M22, 781, filed and served. Bank of America confirmed the account is frozen. Happy hunting. Asterisk. I felt a cold, clean thrill. The first domino had fallen. An hour later, my phone buzzed with an encrypted number I didn't recognize but was expecting. It was a former colleague, now head of compliance at a major casino conglomerate in southern Florida, a relationship I'd cultivated for years. "David," he said, his voice low. "You asked me to flag a name, Thomas Peterman." "I did," I said, my posture straightening. "Well, he just tried to draw a $100,000 credit line at our high-limit blackjack table in Hollywood. The system lit up like a Christmas tree. We declined the transaction and suspended his privileges across all our properties. He made a scene. Security had to escort him out. The word is out, David. He's blacklisted from here to the Bahamas. Whatever you're doing, it's working." I thanked him and hung up. I allowed myself a small, grim smile. I had severed the artery. Now I just had to wait for the body to realize it was bleeding out. I pulled up Brenda's social media. The triumphant posts were gone. They'd been replaced by a single cryptic quote overlaid on a picture of a stormy sea. "Time's a real storm is when the ship goes down with the captain." It was pathetic. And it was perfect. The rats were getting nervous. Then my desk phone rang. The display read, "B. Keller." I let it ring 3 times before answering, my voice a mask of calm professionalism. "David Keller!" "You bastard!" she shrieked, the sound tinny and raw. "You did this! You froze the account! That's my money!" "Brenda," I said, my tone patient, as if explaining a complex derivative to a child. "I'm not sure what you're talking about. I flagged the policy for a standard compliance review, as per the terms my father signed. The firm's actions are dictated by legal protocol, not me." "Don't you lie to me," she spat. "Todd and I can't access a penny. The bank manager mentioned a court order. This has your name written all over it." I leaned back in my chair, swiveling to look out over the Charlotte skyline. "A court order is a public document, Brenda. It would have names on it. But I doubt my name is one of them. I'm simply an officer of the firm ensuring its assets are protected." I let a beat of silence hang in the air. "You should ask Todd about it. Maybe he has a better idea." There was a frantic, muffled sound as she covered the receiver, her voice a sharp whisper to someone in the background. She came back on the line, her bravado wavering. "Todd says his lawyer is going to sue you and your whole company for harassment." The lie was so transparent it was almost sad. "His lawyer?" I asked, my voice laced with surgical curiosity. "Brenda, I'd be very careful who you're taking legal advice from. A court order from Monroe County, Florida, wouldn't originate from a family dispute in Charlotte. It's more likely attached to a pre-existing civil judgment. For instance, one from, say, Phoenix, Arizona." Silence. Not angry silence. A dead, hollow silence. I went for the kill. The name on that judgment wouldn't be Keller. It would be Flores. Maria Flores. And the defendant wouldn't be you. It would be a man named Thomas J. Peterman. You need to ask yourself a very simple question, Brenda. Why does your boyfriend's past have a $300,000 claim on your future? I heard a sharp intake of breath, followed by a choked, sputtering sound. She didn't have an answer. For the first time, she was confronting a problem she couldn't solve with a lie or a tearful performance. I had just handed her the truth like a loaded gun. "I have a meeting to get to," I said, my voice dropping back to its corporate monotone. "I suggest you sort out your personal matters." I hung up before she could respond. The connection was severed. I had done more than freeze their account. I had frozen their alliance. I had turned her partner in crime into a liability, a walking, talking debt that was now her problem to solve. They weren't on a lavish vacation anymore. They were 2 convicts locked in a cell I'd built for them, with the walls closing in. The best part? I hadn't broken a single rule. This wasn't revenge. This was revenge. It was a market correction. The ensuing silence lasted 2 hours. Then, My phone rang again. B. Keller. This time, I answered on the first ring. The shrieking was gone, replaced by a low, conspiratorial whisper. "David," she said, her voice slick with false sincerity. "I had no idea about that woman in Phoenix. Todd, he lied to me. He manipulated me when I was vulnerable." I said nothing. I just listened to the gears of her treachery grind into a new position. "He's a monster," she continued, the phony tears already welling in her voice. "He's the one who forged those invoices. He pressured me. Look, that money, it's a curse, but you can't get it all back, not with his legal troubles. Let's make a deal, you and me. Help me get him out of the picture. I'll wire you $1 million from a separate account he doesn't know about. We tell Blackwood he stole the rest and vanished. You get half back, clean. I get to start over. Please, David, it's what your father would have wanted." There it was, the final, pathetic betrayal, selling out her partner for a fraction of the score. Using my father's name as a bargaining chip. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Not the frozen account, not the legal writ, but this. This grubby, desperate confession of her own soullessness. "No, Brenda," I said, and the calm in my own voice surprised me. "You're wrong. What my father would have wanted was for his legacy to mean something. He thought his gesture of love for you was a monument. You treated it like a lottery ticket." I leaned forward, my voice dropping, each word a chip of ice. This was never about getting the money back. It was about proving what it was worth. And you've just shown me. It was worth exactly one failed con man and a desperate phone call. The firm doesn't negotiate with thieves, Brenda. We prosecute them. Goodbye. I hung up the phone. I didn't feel rage or joy. I felt balanced. The scales had been righted. The financial recovery was now a formality. The moral victory was already mine. Here's my question for all of you. If you were in my shoes, knowing she has to pay all that money back, would you feel any obligation to help her, or would you let her face the consequences she created on her own?